promoted and need to be spread out, because your story is very inspirational, and I'm sure many people, especially Latinas, would like to follow and would like to learn from your experiences. So thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you for saying all those kind words, and thank you for having me.
And just for the record, I'm going to say that until very recent, Sandra Campos was the CEO of Diane from Furstenberg in New York, and now she's a CEO, investor, entrepreneur, startup advisor, consultant, and keynote speaker, and a Latina that has a long story in the fashion industry, in the clothing industry, especially for women. So there's not many like her out there. So Sandra, let me start with the first question. Tell us a little bit about your origins. Where are you from? Where's your family? What kind of values did you have when you were growing up? Where did you grow up? Where did you attend your first years of school, etc.?
Wow. So all of that's a very long history. Every year that passes by. My family, I am a first generation in this country. So my family immigrated from Mexico. My mother is from DF, the Ciudad de Mexico, and my father, the Zacatecas. They both married very young. When they were 18, 19, moved to California, and I was born in California. So I am one of 6 kids. I'm the second oldest, and 4 of us were actually born in California before we moved to El Paso. So my parents and my entire family, actually extended family, my father comes from a family of 7 kids, my mother from 12 kids, and there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in all of this side of the family. So we moved to El Paso so that my father could learn the tortilla business in terms of having and setting up factories. So we lived in El Paso with our family relatives, and he learned the business. And then we moved to Grand Prairie, Texas, the big city of Grand Prairie, Texas, which is actually, as you know, part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And I really grew up in Grand Prairie. So elementary school, middle school, high school, went to school in Grand Prairie, Texas. And that was when my father and my parents had tortilla factories. So I always grew up around the entrepreneurial spirit, where there was always an idea, there was always a new business venture, there was always something else, but they had this foundation in the tortilla business, which up until recently, I didn't realize just how much that actually influenced me in terms of anything having to do with sourcing, manufacturing, production, logistics, shipping, and we spent a lot of time there, whether it was after school or on weekends, or when they had very big orders, we all had to take part and somehow be on the assembly line. So I was eating and counting at the same time to be able to pack up the tortillas. So, I grew up there. I went to school, as I mentioned, in Texas. I went to Texas Tech University for college. I did that during my undergraduate in Lubbock, Texas, which, for those of you who don't know, is not the fashion mecca at all, but it was a state school. It was where I wanted to go. And I had a great 4 years worth of, throughout my, I would say, high school and college, I was really focused on everything that is Texas: cheerleading, football, all of those type of social activities. And I always knew that I wanted to be in fashion, because I was constantly being creative in my mother's home, whether it was putting up new curtains or making slip covers for the sofas. And I was always creating, and then I was making clothes for my siblings, my younger sisters. So there was always that in me. And then when I went to college, I had a roommate that she and I would create t-shirt dresses, and we would, whatever we thought the style was at the moment, we would create, and we started a little bit of a side business doing that as well. So one of the reasons that I then left after college and moved to New York was because I wanted diversity, and I wanted to be a part of a world that to me felt much more like a melting pot that New York was. So I knew that I could either go for fashion in LA or to New York, and I chose New York. And I moved here to New York many, many years ago, and have been in the fashion industry ever since. The core piece of what I tell now my kids, I have 3 kids myself, and my oldest is 20. And so I tell her, I moved to New York City when I was 20 years old. I had graduated college. I moved to New York. I worked 3 jobs for the first 3 years. I had a day job, an evening job, and a weekend job. And that was because I moved to New York making $17,500 a year. And I knew that I needed to be able to learn, but also I needed to pay bills. So, so I had all of that. So, you know, the work ethic, I think that no matter what was always instilled in me was there. And I knew I didn't quit. I really never quit. So I really just continued to pursue what I wanted and what I was interested in from a fashion standpoint. And that's how I started. That was my origin in New York.
Now, let me know if we could go back to that time. You just arrived to New York with big dreams, and maybe an expectation of starting a career and looking for opportunities in a city that is by itself, you know, the mecca of many businesses, fashion, of course, but as you mentioned, a lot of diverse things, culture, financials, politics, everything in New York. What do you think were those initial skills that you had as a young Latina yourself that put you in that position of having graduated and then going to New York to pursue a dream? What were at that time the skills that you think you already had?
I mean, to be honest with you, it wasn't really so much of what I learned in school. It was much more about what I learned through my family and the upbringing that I had, just in terms of hard work and never giving up and pursuing a dream, pursuing a passion. And, you know, my parents sacrificed a lot for us, for the 6 kids. And we all left Texas, actually all 6 of us, and we all pursued different dreams and have a lot of different careers in our family. But I think it was just about the fact that, you know, part of it was that I was also naive because I moved to New York without knowing anything about transportation, about costs of where to live. I didn't know anyone. So I was a little bit naive as far as that goes, and probably was a benefit for me at the time. Mm-hmm. But more than anything else, it was just desire. The desire to learn, the desire to be successful, the desire to be a part of something much bigger than myself and much bigger than what I came from.
What were those initial challenges that you found, and how were you able to overcome them and just continue?
Well, I mean, this is going back obviously, but I just had this conversation with my kids at the dining room table the other night, because I said, you don't even understand. I moved to New York and I didn't know anyone. And I had to, I bounced around, fortunate enough to find people that gave me living accommodations at the time for a few weeks while I was waiting to get into a women's hotel. And I lived in a women's hotel in New York City for a few months. And that's how I actually met some of my closest friends there. But in terms of what I was doing from a work standpoint, it was my ability to communicate, my ability to, because I was always a leader. So whether I was in cheerleading or the head cheerleader or part of my sorority and, you know, part of VP of my sorority, whatever it was, I was always leading. So I knew how to organize and I knew how to really structure my communication. And I think that always helped me, because I started out in sales and my evening job and weekend jobs were on the sales floor and retail and working with buying. So I was always fascinated by people, culture, the differences, and how to really convince somebody. Because I think I'm a big believer that no matter what you do, you're selling. You're selling yourself, you're selling your ideas, you're selling your passions, you're just selling something in your life. And, you know, or selling your rules to your kids, you know, whatever it is, like you're always selling. So communication is so key in your ability to communicate and to speak to others. So I think that was something, you know, above anything else that certainly helped me in the beginning stages.
Now, what was the first job that you got that you said, well, this is exactly what I want, or this is, you know, well, not exactly maybe, but this is the kind of job that I want to keep doing and keep advancing? How was that first position?
So most of you will know the name of Donna Karen. She is a very big New York designer, very big global designer. And I was fortunate enough to be offered a position at Donna Karen during a time when they were launching the brand DKNY. And this was many years ago now, but that was something that was very, very special time. I still talk about that time because it was a group of women, young women and men, but young people at the time in the industry that were early on in our careers, and where a lot of times you'll have competitiveness within that. It was very much a supportive structure, and it was a supportive organization of people who really wanted to really make this dream happen, make DKNY happen, make our own businesses in our own trajectory of businesses work together. So I think when I really realized and felt that this was what I wanted the first time, that was definitely at DKNY, because I had a group of women that I respected. They were so inspirational to me. I admired their skills in so many ways. I have each one of them that I can tell you exactly what each one of them did to this day that really impacted me. And they all ended up becoming very successful in their own lives in different ways. And, you know, I think there's camaraderie, community, all of that, cooperation, collaboration, all that existed then. And I really value that. That is something that I've looked for and valued in every single one of my roles or homes after that, you know, and since that point, because it's it makes it much more pleasant, but also you can respect the individuals that you're working with and you learn a lot more.
And after DKNY, what came into the progression and your you know, your, how did you started evolving into the different positions that you have had?
Right. You know, in hindsight now, I realize that the reason that I am where I am is because I had a lot of different types of jobs. And in the fashion industry, it's not uncommon rather to move around in different locations and different positions and different companies. And because I had the ability during a time when the industry had training programs, I was learning the buying aspect of it. I was learning wholesale business and sales and being in front of accounts, as well as traveling all over the country. So I was able to really understand the consumer. And at the end, everything comes back to the consumer, because when you're in a business that's about product, that's who you care about the most. You care about the consumer, and you care about the product that you're making for them to make sure that you're giving them the value or the quality that they deserve. So, you know, I literally had everything from visual merchandising background to a wholesale sales background to the buying background to, you know, one of the things that happened after Donna Karen was I was able to get into, and that was actually the start of it because we were launching a division, but I was able to get into big companies that were obviously big brand names and well-funded, but also launching new businesses. So I was able to go into companies that were either launching or relaunching brands. So I was able to really look from a creative standpoint as well as analytical standpoint to be able to figure out what those businesses needed to be able to either start, launch, get into the right account structure, build business from a sales volume standpoint, or to retrench and say, identify who we are as a business, who we are as a brand, what do we want to speak to the consumer, and how to get those messages across. So you know, really having been a part of every part of the business. I mean, I then, from a corporate standpoint where I was leading businesses, I had 3 kids, small kids at the time. There were 3 kids under the age of 4, and I was getting divorced. So I needed to be able to take a step back and do something with my family life. So I became an entrepreneur as well. So I've had both the corporate experience and an entrepreneurial experience. So as an entrepreneur, I then added customer service. I added PR to my to my resume because I was the one that was actually doing the PR. I was doing all the marketing aspects and the legal aspects too. So I've kind of done it all because I've been in positions that allowed me to have that flexibility and have those learnings from corporate standpoint, and then also from my entrepreneurial ventures. I just had to do it all because that's what you do as an entrepreneur. As you know, you're involved in everything.
So during your career, you've been able, as you just mentioned, to work in different brands. I mean, these brands are like in the world, like very famous, but are the ones that sometimes young people or not that young people follow to get clothes, to give presents, or to the fashion. And at some point, these brands also kind of say or dictate what people should wear, what people should use. What is, in all your experience with the many brands that you have worked with, you already mentioned the consumer is at the end of the day the most important. But what is some kind of the formula that work better for a brand of clothing in your experience? A brand of fashion that has to be consumable, but at the same time unique maybe. And what's that formula?
Well, fashion is a very dynamic industry, and it's dynamic because we stem from culture. We have diversity and inclusiveness within our industry, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's diversity of culture. We exist as an industry because, and as you see, there's a range of personalities. So you can have the very aristocratic, preppy type of lifestyle from Ralph Lauren to a very eccentric type of lifestyle from another type of brand or a Gucci type of brand. So
Yeah.
you've got real extremes in terms of the personalities that you try to cover. And I think that's the beauty of our industry in general, is that it's creative, obviously. And the most exciting times are when you have a really great creative spirit amongst the company, where you have a creative talent at the top who's really leading the design direction and who keeps it very consistent in terms of the DNA of the brand, what you stand for. And so that's the longevity of a business. And within that, when you have that leadership and you have that ability to be able to see that creativity come alive, then every part of the organization flourishes, because you're able to send out messages that have consistent tone and a consistent visual aspect of it. So branding and the creativity behind all that really is the most important thing. If you look at these long-lasting heritage brands, whether it's DVF, Diane von Furstenberg, or Louis Vuitton, or Hermes, and you look at it, it's like, if you look at those, they never veered from who they were. They stood for quality, they stood for something, whether it's Diane in the wrap dress, or whether it's, Hermes and the scarves and the prints and the leather quality. So you look at these, in Chanel, obviously, you've got these really incredible brands that have been long lasting in the industry because they've been consistent with who they are and what they represent to the consumer. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah. No, definitely, because and I guess, it shows that you are very passionate about that, because it shows on the way you are describing things. Now, being a CEO is like it's a DNA. It's something that you can apply to any industry, right? A CEO of a mining company or a fashion company like yours, or a retail company or a car company, whatever. And I think that it's a very difficult job, because you need to do many things at the same time. You need to be like the orchestrator of an operation that needs to be successful, needs to be trusted, needs to be growing. So what are those skills that in your long career being a CEO of your own ventures and also the companies that you have worked for, what are those skills that you think are maybe the top 3 or 4 most important, or at least the ones that have being to you most important or more relevant to perform?
Well, I find that the role of the CEO is really to be the visionary first and foremost. So you're visualizing the future, and you are communicating that future and getting your team behind you to be able to achieve those results for whatever that vision is. That's one. So obviously within that, if you break that down, a leader needs to be somebody who is able to convince a team and is able to sell in that vision, and to be able to find the right resources, find the right team members who are going to be able to have a collaborative environment, who are going to be able to work together to execute on that vision, and who are going to really work together as a team with that long-term vision in mind. It is, the list is very long when you mention what a CEO has to do, and it is very, very long, especially nowadays, because you have to add all these different elements of what we as companies and individuals need to be on our own brands, as well as how we need to be able to create a brand within a company of how we work together, whether it's inclusivity, whether it's diversity, whether it's the internal culture. All of that has to be there as well. And you're investing in people. So it's very much a matter, in addition to obviously having the vision, you have to be strategic and define how and what those strategies are to be able to execute on that vision. And breaking that down, it goes into, again, having the right team members that you can empower and have them help inform you, but also help you carry that torch. So I always love the quote that Steve Jobs had, which is, why would I hire smart people and tell them what to do? I want them to tell me what to do. And I really love that, because I think it's about empowering others who you're bringing in. You're bringing them in for a reason, not just to be a dictator and tell them what to do, but you want them to be able to help inform the decisions and help to be a part of those decisions moving forward, so that they then can take their teams along the same ride. So those are, I'd say vision, being very strategic, and being able to create a culture and be a facilitator for people.
Yeah. Now, for example, in Diane von Furstenberg, which is your latest position, working for a company. What was the environment when you arrived there, and what were like kind of the missions, or what kind of the objectives to perform or to work immediately? You arrived there in 2018, as I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I did.
Mm-hmm.
And was there until, yes. So basically, if I go back to even the last several roles, it's been always about turning around a business. And in our industry, where there's a lot of roller coaster rides of trends and things that happen in the fashion cycle, there's a lot of businesses that obviously go through really great years and then go down into not being as relevant years. So the DVF brand in particular was a brand that hadn't really had relevance and had a tremendous amount of change over the past 8 to 10 years. And while they had a tremendous ride from 2000 to 2010, since then it was really something that was a bit of a challenge. There was also a lot more competition, whether it was fast fashion, retailers that came in like Zara, H&M, et cetera, social media that changed things, influencers that changed things, a lot more brands out there. So it was a very different landscape than what it was 10 years ago. So the first, my goal and the objective in bringing me in was to be able to really redefine the brand, bring it back to the original DNA, so that there could be a consistency and cohesiveness of the brand once again, from everything from product, the messaging, the marketing, to the customer, and ensuring that we had a global brand. So that was the goal. My goal in coming in there was to say this was a company that has been very wholesale oriented, very traditional in terms of its pattern and objectives, and I wanted to bring it to be a brand that was much more modern and innovative and more D2C, direct to consumer oriented, between our e-commerce and in our own stores. So it was about innovation. So I would say the last 2 years of time was really spent on developing that innovation strategy and creating innovation in terms of e-commerce, website, how we message the consumers, and making it much more direct to consumer than it was focused on a wholesale retailer like a Saks or Neiman's, et cetera. We had those businesses, and they have those businesses still, but just different. We had to be able to straighten out what we were saying about the brand and how we were defining the customer. And that's, again, it's not uncommon to what is happening out there in fashion today. It's just something that was my goal and what I needed to be able to take the company from and to. It's very hard going into any business when you are in a turnaround, because people that exist there, generally don't like change. A lot of people don't. A lot of people do, and they go along for it. But you have to really determine who's going to along for the ride and who's going to want to be able to go through those ups and downs, because it's not easy. And especially in fashion, where we have a timeline that is a minimum of 12, 18 months, just in terms of product deliveries and how your product development cycle works. It takes a good 3 years to see a full effective turnaround. And that this is all pre-COVID, because post-COVID, everything will be different with businesses. But typically it does take a while, and you have to be patient, but you have to be consistent more than anything else.
Now, you have a long experience, and we need to talk about the industry by itself. We all know that retail has been having some changes in the horizon, in the conditions, and is not as is not as good as it was maybe before. Many of the malls are dying, and I mean, what is your interpretation of what's going on in the retail industry, and what has been the reasons for what we are experimenting, and where is this going?
Well, I will say, having seen the industry for the last almost 30 years, I've seen the complete saturation of brands and malls and so much real estate space that you don't have to go very far before you see the same store again and again and again. And that's what has happened. So over the last 5 years, so we've had tens of thousands of stores, physical stores actually close in retail, not all apparel, but still in retail itself. It's because we just had too much. We were making everything too much, too consistent. There's been and with that, when you have so much available, there isn't as much of a demand. So you have markdown cycles and cadences and promotions, and everything's about adding more revenue and performing better than you did last year. And so what do you have to do? You buy more product, you drive more markdowns so that you can drive more traffic into your stores. And I would say that in general, within our industry, we've known that was going on, and we've known that it couldn't last. That bubble was going to burst. It just was too much. And at the same time, with social media, what has been happening is that, where you even mentioned before, there are brands that could dictate and used to dictate what your outfit would be, and head to toe. People used to wear a brand head to toe. It hasn't happened for years now. And it hasn't happened because social media made it okay to be able to wear high-low. It would be okay if you wore Chanel on top and Zara on bottom, or any mixture of brands, high-low or across the board. And you didn't have to look like a billboard for that brand any longer. And I think that has really drastically changed our business, where we no longer can dictate. So the seasonalities of what we do in the fashion shows and the weeks, and delivering product that is wool in August when no one's wearing wool in August in this country, that's an example. I mean, those are just things that have been a little out of sync with what's happening in the consumer's life. And as we become more accustomed with social media, we become more accustomed with new disruptive brands. And you look at the brands that have come and have changed the industry, those founders didn't come from fashion. They came from outside of fashion, and they just said, hey, I want a great t-shirt. We're going to start Everlane, or I want to be able to bring in bonobos, or I want to do, there's just a ton of different examples, and they're doing things differently because they could. And that is shaking everything up, because we have to look and say, why are we doing these very traditional type of businesses when a lot of it just doesn't make sense anymore? The customer isn't buying those things in August, and she's, we're no longer as a consumer base, let's say, buying things and holding on to them before you wear them. It's much more about immediate gratification. I don't know when the last time was you bought something and waited 6 months to wear it, but it doesn't happen as often. There's a select group, certainly, of customers that will do that. But in general, when you're talking about the broad customer base, it's not happening anymore. So those are all things that have really changed our business and changed the outlook and how we actually do business, how we develop our product cycles, how we actually what type of product we make. And at the end of the day, because we're always trying to be more and more and more in this very capitalistic society that we have, we're creating more product and therefore more waste. And so the sustainability aspect of the discussions that we've had for the last 5 years also has become more and more and more important. What are we doing with all that waste? Why are we producing that much? Inventory management has been a big topic, where we need to get better and better and better, and and be okay with businesses that are not doubling last year, and be okay with businesses that are just being more profitable, more mindful to the community and to the environment. And all those conversations have been happening. All of that is what's going on. So it has been changing our industry. It's dramatically changing our industry. And Diane, I can quote her, because she's been saying, if you, as a human, if you had a pre-existing condition pre-COVID, then you could potentially get sick or potentially even die from COVID. Same thing's happening with businesses. If you had a pre-existing condition, and if you didn't have that great, that great bank account, or you didn't have that really set and established business that was able to weather this very big storm, you're going to have problems. So that's happening in our business as well. It's a lot of businesses. I mean, you've seen Hertz, which who would have ever thought Hertz would have gone bankrupt? You've seen really big businesses, and you've seen others that are going out of business. So it really is about shaking everybody up to say, what do you stand for? And this is my belief anyway, that we all have to kind of go back and say, like, what do we stand for? What do we want to be? Who's our customer? We don't have to be everything to everyone anymore. We just want to be really that great brand that stands for quality, that stands for consistency, that you can count on for that great pair of pants or that great wrap dress or whatever it is that you're looking for. And know that the customer is going to go to various brands to be able to fill their lifestyle needs. It's not going to be all one. So you just can't be everything to everyone anymore.
Of course. So I mean, you kind of a little bit of advanced my next question, because it was, I mean, you are like a brand guru in the fashion industry. So what would be like the new normal after the decline in the industry, which we already talked about, and the COVID and the pandemic thing? There's new opportunities, there's a new panorama, there's new context. What will be now the route of a successful brand for clothing or for fashion? What do you think should be those elements to take in account?
Well, to me, again, these are obviously my opinions, but there's nothing more important than having a brand with a purpose and having a real purpose that's genuine. That everyone's looking to be a part of a community, and finding that community that you're a part of, it gives you the ability to have advocates, to have ambassadors of a brand, and that's good enough. Like, that's what it is, you know, when you, and I'm saying this because look, every brand has ambassadors of their brand, but then they become very big, and then they start getting, you know, others that are just kind of like side entry type of consumers, not necessarily like true fans. So so whether it's fans, ambassadors, advocates of your brand, like really being able to be that truly special brand for that consumer, being very pointed and targeted at who it is you're going after. You know, a successful brand can take many forms in terms of what the actual product is. In fashion, we're always looking for the next savior of a business and the next most creative person out there. So there's a lot of opening and ability to come and get a community excited within fashion. So that's very easy to enter the fashion stage. It's about maintaining your customer base and actually being successful and profitable. That's the harder part of it. So to me, that what will help us in the future overall as an industry is when we have businesses that are truly just focused on their customer, and it's okay that they don't get all the customers, but they're getting their customer, and they're getting their advocates and their ambassadors who will do everything for that brand and stand by them. You know, great examples, whether it's Patagonia as one, who they stand for something and they do it really well, and they will do that all day long, every day, all year long. You know, it's one of the examples I use because I love what they stand for, and I love even more that they don't care if you don't wear their brand, but they have plenty of what they do that is actually much more admired and much more desired by the fans that they do have.
Yeah. Now, what in terms of your career as a Latina and as a woman, what were, or would it be fair to say that you encountered different conditions or more challenging conditions than others that could be, you know, men or non-Latinos? How was your experience being a Latina and growing into the corporate ladder of a industry that is by far not dominated by Latinos, the way? So how difficult was that, if any? And if not, what were the challenges or the opportunities that you had to overcome or take?
So one of the things that I have probably never really spoken about, but it's something that I feel obligated to speak about now because I don't think it's as uncommon as I thought, is that especially coming from Texas, and one of the reasons that I wanted to leave Texas at the time, this is again decades ago, I wanted that diversity, and I wanted more of the acceptance, and I didn't want to feel, you know, I always kind of felt a little left out. Granted, it's a different time today than it was back then for me and my experience, but I moved to New York, and I had a very thick Texas Southern accent. I was working for a man who had a very thick Brooklyn accent. So his name was Off the Least, and he and I couldn't understand each other for the first week. So he literally sat with me. He sat next to me, made me sit next to him for the first year that I worked there. And he kept saying to me, enunciate your words, enunciate your words. So that finally, after a year, I had kind of lost my accent, or the majority of my accent. So to me, the beginning, it was more about being like the Texan that was out of place, that needed to fit in. And then, you know, I don't know that I ever really thought of myself being shunned or separated because of being Latina. I don't think I ever did. I was always pursuing a dream that I had, and I always had milestones that I wanted to achieve in my own life based on an age or based on a job or position or a compensation, whatever it was that I was doing. I had goals. So I don't know that that ever held me back. Certainly in terms of male, female, it exists. You know, it does. I've also had amazing male mentors and really great male bosses that I worked really well with, that have given me amazing opportunities. So I can say that I've had both experiences, and it does exist. But I think we can also individually, again, my opinion, we can also individually, you know, take a little bit of that apart and just the more we learn, the harder we work, the more that we communicate appropriately and effectively, I think that there's room for all of us. You know, I was fortunate because I came to New York to have that diversity and to be in a place and in an industry that's very diverse. So I don't think that, you know, I may have seen it as much as if I were in a different type of industry, but that was at least my experience. I've had a little bit of both.
Yeah. No, it's very valid in that sense. And yeah, New York might be a very good city to go and start something if you are different, because everybody's different there, right? So
yeah. But look, I would, if I have any regrets, and I will absolutely always have these regrets now, but if I have any regrets, it's that growing up, being a first generation with my mother coming and picking me up speaking Spanish, and me, you know, putting my head down and trying to walk away at school so that nobody knew she was talking to me. It was that kind of a thing where I didn't then, even though my parents both spoke to us in Spanish and we answered back in English, I didn't then take that and do the same thing to my kids. I wish I would have like spoken Spanish in the home, made sure we had it in the home, and myself too, so that I can continue to perfect it. But that's a regret that I have. So
now, talking about that, Sandra, how has been your life balance? From our experience in the magazine, we have done, you know, thousands of interviews through the years, and I was explaining you the other day with our Mexican title as well. We have a long story of interviews, and my impression as editor or publisher for these titles is that women have you know, better balanced lives, no? Because from the very beginning, they are daughters and sisters, and then they become wives, and then mothers, and then, but they are at the same time executives or CEOs or lawyers or physicians, and they are like from the very early on taught to have a balance in your personal life and a role as a woman, and also your career, your professional career. And you usually see that stability that is, I think, more evident and better well constructed in women than men. I mean, in comparison to that, men are always, you know, you focus on your career, forget about, you know, the family or the things that you focus on your career, and then later you can do some of the things. In your experience, I mean, how have you balanced your life? I mean, you already mentioned that you have 3 kids, that you got divorced when they were very small, so that should have been a real challenge. Could you share some of your lessons there with us?
wow. I wish I had really good lessons. No, I've made a lot of my own, as we all do, mistakes, and learned through my experiences. I have been a single mom with my kids for the last almost 15 years, and that's a long time. And so when I first, you know, I've also been very lucky. Look, I look today at what's happening with women and the amount of pressures. Thank goodness I don't have kids that are young in school, and I had to work as well as homeschool them, because that's really, really hard. And I know that there's a big challenge right now in terms of women and their choices to go back to the workforce or to stay at home with their kids and just shoulder everything. And the burdens are real. I also had the ability to have a nanny because I was working, and I had that ability. So thank goodness I had somebody else who was with me, helping me to raise my kids and take the 3 of them to their different activities and whatnot. So I can't say I did all of that on my own. And that would have been even harder. And I really take my hat off to every woman that does that, because I know that there are many that have a lot more sacrifices, and I certainly have. But, you know, I think it's really about organization and not trying to do everything, because you can't. I am not one that believes that you can have it all. I know that there are people that believe it. I have not experienced that in my life. I don't think you can have it all. I think you're going to have it all at some points in a day or some days. And I think you're going to have days where you don't, you know, it's a terrible day and you're not able to get it all done, or, you know, things fall by. And just like everything else, and I think especially when you compare what you try to do in terms of creating a culture, a team environment, and you try to put strategies together, it's really important to focus on, and this is something I learned from Franklin Covey, actually, the Franklin Covey group, which is you really have to focus on 3 things and know that you can't do it all, because when you start focusing on more than 3, you do less and less and less. And I think the stats are that if you try to focus on 6 objectives, you're going to achieve 0. If you focus on 3, you'll achieve all 3. So it's the same thing in terms of your own home life as well. Like if you try to do everything, you're not going to do it well at all, and you're going to burn yourself out. So if you just try to really focus on the things that are most important, perhaps that'll be a little bit better and a little bit easier. You know, that's somewhat of what I try to think about now. I'm not great at having balance because I always have my phone with me, and I'm always doing some sort of work and looking for the next, you know, a great idea and innovation. But it's important, I think, to just not be hard on yourself. And I've realized that over the years. I didn't realize that if you had asked me that 5-8 years ago, I wouldn't have thought the same thing. But now I definitely think it's important not to be as hard on yourself, because days are going to be hard. They will be hard. And, you know, whether you're male or female, balance doesn't necessarily exist all the time. There'll be some of the time that you have great balance and some of the time you don't.
Yeah.
So take those times that you do and seize those moments and have happiness and joy when you have them.
Yeah. Well, what a great.
We live in a fast-paced society right now, right? We're in an age where everything is faster and faster and faster. So it's very hard to say you can have it all, because you can't even keep up with the amount of information that exists every day. I used to think I knew so much, and now I'm like, wait a minute, but there's that and that I can't get to every day. So you got to be easier on yourselves, I think, in general. I'm trying that way.
That's a great reflection. Now, before wrapping up and maybe taking some questions from the people who have joined us for this interview, Sandra, what are your visions for the future? I mean, you are a young executive still, with a lot of experience, with a lot of visions for industry, this industry. What do you think? What are you going to do? What are your plans? How do you see your own future?
So as you mentioned before, as of Friday, actually as of this week, I guess Monday, I've transitioned into a consultant for Diane von Furstenberg and for DVF, the company, because the company itself is we spent 3 months really changing the business model and focusing on it a little bit differently, just again, because of what we were talking about with fashion. But one of the things that through this COVID time period, what I saw, I had an internship program that was happening this summer, and I had some very bright, very talented women that were going to come from school and take their time and intern for us. But that, because of COVID, wasn't going to happen. So I thought, you know what? I talked to my team. I said, why don't we put together a workshop series so that we can talk and give them some knowledge and insights, even though they won't physically be a part of this. But then I realized, I said, well, wait a minute. There are so many people that have to pivot at this time. We have a lot of change. A lot of people are losing their jobs. This shouldn't just be for interns. I should do something for the industry, because I was fortunate enough to see a time in the industry when we had a lot of great training programs, and those training programs allowed you the ability to see different aspects of the business and truly understand the departments, the functions, and what was needed. And maybe if you didn't like one area, you could go to a different area. So I'm creating and have started to create a workshop series. It's called the Fashion Launchpad. I have one of the interns who is going to be with me this summer. She is actually working on it with me, and I have a few other people working on it as well. And the Fashion Launchpad is actually a workshop series that will be masterclass style classes that will be very, very focused on topics within each industry. It'll be for beginners, early career to mid-level career as well. And they're going to have masterclass teachings by executives, CEOs, founders. I just posted it on LinkedIn. I said, oh, here's what I'm going to do. And I literally got bombarded with emails. So I've had more than 1,000 people that are like, I want to do it. I want to join. And I realize it's because at a time when we know that our industry is flawed and has flaws, and we want to be able to be an industry that, again, as I was mentioning before, it's a dynamic industry. There's a lot of great things about it, but we want to reduce the amount of turnover. We want to create excitement for individuals, and we want to give them the ability to understand truly what this industry is about and what they can do within each of the functions. So that workshop series will start at the end of this month. We're creating it now. It will go live hopefully 3rd, 4th week of June. So that's one thing. And then I have a few other things that I'm working on now, as well as I'm a startup advisor for 4 different companies that are startups, and I've been doing that. They're female startups, female founders from, one is in technology, one is in beauty, and two are in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do that because I feel like I've had enough of my own experience that I want to give back and help others as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let me turn now to Jimena. She might have some questions already ready to be asked from the people that are participating in this interview, if you will, and then we'll come back just to wrap up. So Jimena, do you have any questions?
Hi, Sandra. Yes. Well, actually, I have one question for you to start it off. As someone that was born and grew up in Texas, I actually left to New York as well when I was 18 to pursue my career, go to school, everything, because I wanted to go into fashion. But then I realized, what would you tell? I know there's a lot of people that want to pursue fashion or want to work in the industry, but obviously for so many different reasons, they can't go to New York. What do you say or tell people that want to pursue fashion but live in other cities? Do you think location is something that's really important if you want to be in fashion or be someone successful in that industry?
So that's interesting. You and I should talk later, Jimena. One of the things that I will absolutely say that is part of, and I mentioned this earlier, is part of what and why I do what I do is because I was around consumers so much. And that was through going around and traveling to different locations and working in retail. I mean, I worked on the sales floor. I worked in retail. I was visual merchandiser, putting together, stacking up denim and folding them. I did all those things. And while it seems like a really terrible job at the time, and it seems like could potentially be grunt work, it really is something that was the most valuable in terms of learning differences about people, demographics, consumer behavior, the tastes, etc. And it really is extremely valuable now because I don't think that there is any limitation on where you can do fashion any longer. You can do it out of Edina, Minnesota if you want to, as long as you have something that's unique, that you can create your own brand, differentiation. There's always got to be a point of differentiation. And no, I don't think so. I just think the best learning, and I would absolutely I would go back and work retail today in a store because I think it's like, that's what you absorb the most. So no, I don't think you have to be where the big companies are anymore. And especially now, I think more and more companies are seeing that from COVID, it's possible to be remote and it's possible to understand more, but it's all about the consumer focused first and, be able to do a lot of things remotely.
Great. Thank you. So let me jump into some of the questions that our audience has. Our first question is, why do you think more Latinas are not in leadership positions in the fashion industry? Do you think it's education, experience, self-confidence, or do you find some Latinas that they simply do not want to be in a leadership role?
My experience is a couple of those. One is, and this goes for females in general, I think there's a confidence and a self-confidence challenge that we all can take on and be better at. I have this conversation on a very frequent basis because I will hear women all the time apologizing for things. Oh, I'm so sorry. And so I'm like, why are you sorry? What guy is saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's not to be sexist, but I'm saying one of the things that we have to be as females as well, and this goes into being a Latina also, we're not inferior. We don't have to apologize. If I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, we don't have to apologize for what we are. Like it's a matter of being confident with who you are, how you communicate, what your ideas are, and think things through. So one part is the self-confidence aspect of it. The second part that I would say is I have found anyway that Latinas have ended up getting out of the industry for a little bit more time, whether they're raising their kids and then not coming back. At least this has been my experience, more so. And I don't really know why that is statistically speaking, but I have seen that they've kind of left the industry earlier on and not come back just from raising their kids at home.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what type of mental health challenges did you face early in your career, and how did you overcome those items, such as fear, belief, boldness to dare to pursue and achieve your dreams, or did you always know you'd be successful?
Well, I do believe you have to believe it yourself before you actually get there. But I always knew, like I said before, I've had milestones. So I always put milestones in my mind of, here are my goals. This is what I want to be by this age, by that age. And I put those out there. And then I'm generally a glass half full person. So I always think it's going to happen even before it's going to happen. And the older that I get, the longer I'm in this business, obviously there's more confidence with having more experience, and that just comes naturally. So if I go back to think about some of those, I had a lot of fears, you know, and I think no matter what you have fears of speaking in front of people, fears of speaking at your first board meeting, fears of going up to your CEO for the first time and presenting a plan to them. You know, how do you communicate? How do you get that across? Practice, practice, practice is really important, to be able to really practice absorbing and taking in from other leaders that you can listen to and absorb how they communicate. Was that successful way? Was it not? You know, when you're in meetings and hearing other people talk and you see who responds and how they respond to that individual, take lessons, take notes, and try to apply those into your own versions. And I would say the more informed you are, the better. So I always like to make sure that I am as informed and prepared as possible for whatever it is that I'm speaking to.
Great. So let's see, having myself little girls, what would you say to young girls who are about to start college to be successful and have a full life?
Well, that's okay. So I have, my oldest is 20. She's in college. I have a middle child who is graduating high school. And then I have a younger one who's 16. So my kids are all within that age of going into college and really talking to them about real life. And I always talk to them and say, you know, yes, academics and what you're going to learn in school is going to get you to one level, but it really is about your work ethic and who you know. The networking aspect of it, there were a lot of years that I didn't do it, or I was like, oh, I'm going to go home to my kids and I'm not going to go to this networking event or to this industry event because I just either didn't want to, or I didn't have time to, or I didn't have the energy to, whatever it was. But those are really good things to do because you learn from everyone. And so those two areas where I'd say it's really about your work ethic, your experience, because experience is also everything, and who you know from a networking standpoint, because you'll be able to connect the dots much more easily for something that you do want, that you can bring to the table. And, you know, I do a lot of connecting. One of the things that I love to do is I'm obsessed with LinkedIn, but I love to be able to connect with people that I don't know, speak to people, meet with people, seeing what they're doing, because I learn from everybody. And whether it's new innovation companies on e-commerce or AI or retail, anything, I meet with them because I want to know what's going on. And I think that one thing that I'll tell people all the time is, like, you have to ask. People want to help. And if I would encourage young girls, I encourage them to just go and ask for the help. Just ask, but be very specific on what you're asking for so that somebody knows what they need to do for you. If you come to me and say, hey, I just want to know about the industry in general, that's a pretty broad question, which is fine. But if you come and say, I'd like to know about buying in the industry, or I'd like to know how do I get my foot in the door in the industry, or I'd like to know how do I get promoted from this role to that role, it's a very specific question. People want to help. So the worst thing you can do is just not ask because you're afraid to, or you think somebody's not going to respond, because you definitely won't get an answer then. But if you do go out and ask the question, you're more than likely going to get a yes.
Thank you. So last question before we go. What would you advise a small brand going forward now in the aftermath of Corona and the current economy?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know what the brand is in terms of if it's a product brand or whatnot, but right now, post-Corona, we all have to be cognizant of what is happening and what in people's lives, what's important in people's lives. You know, I was reading this morning that there was GemSource increased 800% over last year. Their sales increased 800%. And it went on to give stats on what was happening within the fitness world. You know, will it last? We don't know. But things that are important in our lives today is what we need to be thinking about, how we address those needs. And that, you know, you may not need a $500 dress today because we're all sitting at home and you can only see the top half of us, but you know, what are those things that you will need? Because we're all looking at our home a little bit more. We're all looking at a camera or at a phone a little bit more. We're all looking in different things. So those are, for any small business, I would say we all have to kind of pivot at times, and pivoting now because of COVID is really going to be about what's that need today that didn't exist 3 months ago. I mean, 3 months ago was a very different world for all of us. And now we just have to look and reassess, and it's going to take a while before we get back to any, whatever we all think is going to be normal. It's still going to take a while to get there. Great,
All right.
thank you.
Well, thank you, Jimena, for the questions. I think, I mean, we have many participants that have asking questions, but unfortunately, I mean, we don't have that much of time. But maybe we can have a second round of conversations later on, Sandra. I want to really thank you for, first of all, your time. Second, the trust that you had in us in sharing all these visions and experiences. I think they were very, very fulfilling, and it all confirms the admiration that we have for you. I think you are a true leader in the industry, you yourself, your career, and for that we are very, very thankful for you for showing the way for many other people that might be following you and want to follow you, but also because your success is at the same time the Latina success. I mean, we need more like you, but you being pioneer is very important, and that's our mission in our magazine, is to follow up these stories and promote them and you know, connect them with other leaders. So thank you again for your participation. I don't know if there's something else that you would like to add before we go.
Thank you. So thank you so much. First of all, it's really an honor, and I very much appreciate all these kind words. And it's not, I don't take it lightly. I take it very, very seriously. So thank you for that. I would say, and I think this is important because we are on this call with Latino leaders, is that I didn't embrace it as early on because I didn't know that there were other people like me. I didn't know that there was a whole group of entrepreneurs or a whole group of Latinas in tech or a whole group of Latinas doing something else. I didn't know that. And over the last few years, really, as I have been exposed to more Latinos that are helping others get on boards or helping others through a Stanford entrepreneurial program or other things, the more I'm able to embrace that. So I think that it's so important to be aware. What you're doing is so important. It's so important because there are people out there that don't know that these things exist, and they don't know that they have role models and mentors that they can rely on. And I think we're all here for each other. We are. I know I talk to Latinas a lot now, all the time, and I hear the same thing from them. We just want to help each other because the more we rise together.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that message, and I'll make sure that we continue in touch with you for many other things and ideas, and get you briefed. So thank you very much, and I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us. It's been a great interview, and the last thing is that we just need to work on your photographs and see if you have some photos that you can send us, or we can also take new ones.
Do you want like headshot photos, or you want like casual?
I think we need to. I mean, this is for publication in the magazine as well. So we will need at least like 4 or 5 maybe different ones, and I would say a variety could work better. Maybe a couple of close-ups or headshots, and then other 2 or 3, you know, larger in action, maybe with when you are in action, like even giving a conference or traveling or with your family, if you will. I mean, something that could be different. And I think that's it. That's the main information that we need right now.
Okay, I will do it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No, on the contrary, Sandra. Thank you very much, and take care up there in New York. Hopefully, you can start going out soon and normalize whatever can be normalized. And thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jimena. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Sandra. So nice meeting you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.